Guys, we're going to finish the chapter today. I think this is chapter 15, Europe after the 1400s. So, now we're going to focus more on the age of discovery and how European nations started to seek out, foreign land. So, a very important term that we want to remember is called mercantilism. This is, again, more evidence growing stronger. We're moving to large states in which the ruler has a lot of power. So the purpose of mercantilism, it's an economic system, and the idea is a country wants to export more goods that it imports to increase gold and silver. So the idea is, if you're in England, you sell goods overseas in return for silver and gold, right? This usually involves adding colonies. The point of the American colonies was to sell British goods to, like textiles. You do rely on the colonies for raw goods to help your industry. But because it's a colony, you're not necessarily competing, and you're not, you're not buying anything from them per se. So a colony will help you in your, overall wealth. Okay, so again, the basic idea is this idea of exporting more than you import to increase gold and silver accumulation, and again, it involves colonies. Again, a great example of the growing centralization of governments in Europe. Not only are they taxing their people, but they're establishing these trade policies that will create wealth in that country. So what you're going to start to see as a kingdom, or as as England or France, as they practice mercantilism, they're going to see their wealth grow, and that means you're going to see more silver and gold coming into your country, and that's capital, right? You're going to see banking and lending systems emerge, especially in Italy. The Medici family, they're the ones that paid Da Vinci and Michelangelo, I believe, one of those two. I'm not sure, the patrons. So you're going to see a increase in banking and lending, right? The gold and silver will be loaned out to people who need it, right, in the form of loan. So this is all part of, again, a change that's occurring in Europe, politically, right? The government is following policies that increase the nation's wealth. Adam Smith is an important philosopher. He's an economic philosopher. He wrote a book called Wealth of Nations. And you've heard this phrase, laissez-faire. He's the author of this. And he argues that, governments should actually, limit regulations to promote exports and discourage imports. So, laissez-faire goes against mercantilism. That's important, right? So, a laissez-faire economist would say, no, don't, don't control this. Allow it to happen naturally. If you end up importing or exporting, it doesn't matter. So Adam Smith would go against, or he always went against the idea of mercantilism, and that's important. Today, I think this is fairly common in Republican circles, right? Republican leaders believe in less regulation, government regulation of business, right? Fewer taxes, fewer tariffs, where again, a mercantilist system would encourage, would tax goods coming into a country. Again, to increase the export. So two different philosophies. So remember, Adam Smith does not support mercantilism. All right, so it's during the early 1400s where we see a commercial revolution. Not industrial revolution, but commercial revolution. Transformation from a local, small-scale trade system based on bartering, the exchange of goods, to large-scale international trade using gold and silver. And it's the idea of commercialism, right? You're now, going overseas to trade things, using ships, using, accumulating a lot of wealth. So what's causing this commercial revolution? Well, overseas colonies, like in the Americas for England, and Spain and Portugal, right? Eventually, England's going to expand its colonies to Asia, India. But that's the idea, is that you're going to sell your products in the Americas. You're going to sell your products in Asia in return for that gold and silver. You will pull out resources that are necessary for your textile industry, like maybe cotton, right, or other things. New ocean routes are very important. That's what Columbus is famous for, right? Establishing a new way of traveling. Population's going to grow, so there's a demand for good. There's a demand for gold and silver. But when you do have an accumulation of more gold and silver, you are going to see inflation. So that's not always a good thing for the consumer. It's great for those exporters or those producers, but for the consumer that's expense. Increase money supply, you're going to see prices expand. New companies are emerging called stock companies, kind of like the stock exchange, right? These are limited liability companies, meaning a group of investors come together to create a company, an export company, and it's limited liability, meaning, all right, if the corporation doesn't work out, you don't lose all of your money. If you do well, you share in those profits, right? So the two famous early stock companies are the East India Company. It's a British company. Eventually, they'll be selling tea into the Americas, and the Dutch East India Company is a Dutch company, right? And again, these companies have investors. They pool their money to start this company, and these are export companies, trading companies. All right, so it's during this time, the early 1400s, mid to late 1400s, 1400s, Columbus. You're going to see explorers explore. So why? Why are we going to see the Portuguese start sailing around the Atlantic? Why is Columbus going to sail across the Atlantic? Well, kingdoms were looking. People were looking for land. There were primogeniture laws. Remember those? These are laws that basically said if you're a nobleman or a landowner, your oldest born son would inherit your land. Well, that stunk for the second or third or fourth son. So you have wealthy young men who can't obtain land in Europe, so they want to find land overseas. Um, Religious tolerance, right? The Puritans came over to America to kind of, get away from the Catholic influences of the Anglican Church. Um, the Spanish are gonna, try to spread Catholicism. So that's something that drove at least the Puritans, religious tolerance. Explorers like Columbus wanted glory and adventure and wealth. The three G's, right? Gold, God, and glory. But please understand that the accumulation of silver and gold was a very important factor. In fact, if I'm writing an essay, I might say that was the main driving factor, right? Again, mercantilism, and that would be bringing in gold and silver, trading goods, things along those lines. It's interesting. It's during this age of discovery that the Europeans become the middleman. When you go back to the Silk Roads, the middlemen were Arab traders, Mongol traders who were exchanging goods from, say, China with European merchants, right? Well, now with these all-water routes, Europeans are going to be the middleman between the Americas and China, right? So goods might travel from India along the Indian Ocean route into the Mediterranean or around South America, and then eventually they make its way to the Americas, or the other way around too. It doesn't matter. But that's the idea: is eventually the role of the European trader will change. So what are you trading? Sugar, tobacco, and rum from the Americas might make its way to Europe, and then from there along the Silk Roads of the Indian Ocean trade, those goods would travel, and in return, these traders would exchange those goods for silk, spice. Maybe you would just sell your tobacco for, you would purchase silk with gold or silver. So the Europeans are just changing the game a little bit, mostly by sea. They're trading by sea, not along the Silk Roads. There was lots of competition, though, with Muslim traders on both land and sea. So Columbus devised a new way. He says, listen, I don't need to go around Africa. I'll go across the Atlantic, and I'll get to India. Well, obviously, he was wrong. But he does create a new trading system, right? The American trading system. The early empires that were known for their overseas expansion or discovery were Portugal, England, France, and Spain. Women actually saw an increase in their role. Many would become traders, accountants. They would be involved in money-changing services. So women are not just sitting back making things at home. They're getting involved in these companies and businesses. Maybe not owning them, but they are playing a role in trade. All right, so what other factors contributed to this age of discovery? New technology. Columbus may not make it to the Dominican Republic if he doesn't have, if he's not an expert at cartography. or if the Chinese compass isn't developed, if he didn't study those wind patterns, the Chinese rudder made its way to these European ships. And not just that, but Newton's discovery of gravity helped explorers understand tides. Gunpowder was used in defense from pirates. Gunpowder comes from China. So we see exchanges helping someone like Ferdinand Magellan or Christopher Columbus. So who are some other famous explorers? Prince Henry the Navigator was not an explorer. He was a teacher. He had a navigational school in Portugal, and he also will sponsor trips to India and Africa. He is the Portuguese father of exploration. It's because of him that Vasco da Gama is the first European to sail around Africa to India in 1848. So, Columbus makes it to the Americas first, but da Gama makes it to India from Europe. So we always give da Gama some credit. How far east did European ideas make it? Well, Catholic settlements are found in Japan. Missionaries make their way to Japan. So Christianity does spread into Asia. Maybe not like Buddhism, but you're going to find Christian missions all over the world, including in Asia, because of the Portuguese. All right, Magellan, he's known for circumnavigating the globe. He didn't make it. He actually was killed by Filipino natives, but his crew did make it from Spain and basically circled the earth. He went around South America. And why was it important? Because he helps to create Spanish colonies in the Philippines, and also he creates an open doorway to China. Again, you can get to China and avoid those Arab merchants or Arab middlemen. You can basically get to India on your own without anyone helping you. All right, so as Portugal began to explore and make it to India, along the way they would build forts, trading posts. The East India Company, for example, built these forts in India. The idea would be, a trading post where now you could buy and sell things with the Indian people pretty much directly, like putting a store there. Sepoys were Indians who were trained by the English, who would help the English. And these sepoys would eventually kind of help spread English influence throughout India. If you go to India, they speak English, and that's because of these early trading posts. Eventually, England would gain control of India in the 1900s, and that's where Gandhi would kind of step in and start to rebel against that. So again, these are called trading posts. The Portuguese had trading posts all over Africa because they're sailing around Africa, and they had their own trading posts in India as well. And these trading posts are very important. You're creating a global economic system where you're finding, Christian and European traders in India. That's the definition of globalism: global trade, global interaction, global, transfer of goods and ideas. A little bit about the Dutch. They too had trade routes throughout Asia and the Americas. They actually had faster and lighter ships than the Spanish, and the Dutch East India Company helped establish trading posts in the Spice Islands, which would be Malaysia and Indonesia. One of the first major banks of the world is the Bank of Amsterdam. So the Dutch were known for their banking. They would trade currency. They would obviously finance projects in Europe. And the Dutch basically were known to have the highest standard of living back then. And a lot of that came from their mercantilist policies. England and France did struggle early on. They were not known for their colonialism right away. A lot of their financial investments kind of went belly up. And because of high debt in France, you're going to see, because of France's struggles to export goods, they're going to be struggling with debt, and that will lead to the French Revolution. So I think the Dutch and the Portuguese were probably the most effective at trading into India. The Spanish were effective in terms of trading into the Americas. The English and the French would slowly develop that trade system, but it would probably wouldn't happen until the early 1600s. Jamestown is the first English colony. So really between 1492 and I'd say 1607, the English and the French were pretty much much, left out of the ballgame a little bit. All right, that's it, guys. We're gonna have a quiz on this right after you take your notes. You can take the quizzes.